So the show, I'm Steve Heller, and I curated the show outside, which was basically, I called a number of the artists and told them if they don't do it, their names will be mud. Complaints is not a depressing or whining collection of posters, but it is an opportunity to directly, symbolically, and abstractly get something off the artist's chest. Most, as you can see outside, speak to the global and intimate concerns that impact all of us. Some are a little more obscure. A few are complaining about personal annoyances, while others have the weight of the world on their shoulders. I've selected two posters, one from Complaints, the exhibition, The Inalienable Right, and one from the Wolfsonian collection. Both address the idea of work, and both coincidentally are done in a line-a-cut style. One is from 2014, the one you see here, and the other is from 1935. The recent poster is by Igor Hofbauer from Zagreb, Croatia. His poster, he explained, is a personal bugaboo, a complaint about ergonomics and the disadvantages of being an illustrator. You might say he's touching on the very real complaint of those who sit at desks all day long, often without company or respite. And yes, it's a valid problem, but I don't cry for him too much. The other is by Paul Herzl, a German-born American painter and printmaker who did a series of satiric prints complaining comically and seriously at the same time. One was, that I love, is The League of Rain, and the other is showing a sea of hats waiting to be hired called Man Wanted. Since I can only show two pictures, you have to use your imagination on that. And don't complain to me, complain to John. But this one, titled Dividing Up, has special resonance. Despite the overused cliche of the fat cat mogul, the sentiment has not changed much. It's only gotten worse. The 1% has gotten richer and more controlling of our lives and government. The worker has lost security, income benefits, and other health care, not to mention the industry that once at least kept them alive. The middle class is dead or dying, and the oligarchs pay obscene amounts of cash for the best places to live and the finest foods to eat. Minimum wage increases are attacked by these blackguards, and all manner of once skilled and unskilled laborers are screwed. But the complaint is not that it's happening, but that the United States continues to let it happen. Paul Herzl would have a lot to say today. I'm just so mad. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Jon Mogul. I'm Assistant Director for Research and Academic Initiatives here at the Wolfsonian. The painting I'm showing here is on our 5th floor. It's alternately called Suicide with Skyscrapers or Man on Ledge. The artist is Stuyvesant Van Veen, a New Yorker who was best known as a mural painter. And according to Wikipedia, I couldn't confirm this myself, if you visit the Ebbets Fields apartments in Brooklyn, you can find the murals about the Brooklyn Dodgers that he painted in one of the building lobbies. The painting, I think, is pretty remarkable in how strongly it invites the viewer to engage with it at the level of narrative. What's going to happen next is pretty straightforward. We have the title, after all, to tell us that. But how and why this young man got out onto that ledge is more of a mystery. And the painter makes it even more of a mystery by electing to show this man's face from an oblique angle. By obscuring the expression on his face, Van Veen is depriving us of the kinds of individual psychological clues that might help to figure out how he got out there. So I think the clues have to be found not in the way that Van Veen renders the human figure here, but in how he renders his surroundings. In other words, in the realm of social psychology rather than individual psychology. And that brings me to a complaint. In particular, the painting embodies a trenchant complaint about life in modern times, one that's most closely associated with the French social theorist Emil Durkheim. Durkheim wrote a book in 1897, coincidentally, called Suicide. In that book, he sort of gave currency to the term anomie as a way of getting at one of the more disturbing aspects he identified in urban industrial societies. The idea here, the idea of anomie, is that in such a society, the values that are enunciated by the larger community, ideology in other words, can lose their connection to the experience of individual people. And as a result, the norms that govern behavior lose their hold over individuals. And where that happens, social deviance, things like crime, drug abuse, and suicide can flourish. So here's my narrative about this painting. Look at it again. Here is a young man at the heart of one of the biggest and most crowded cities on earth. Perhaps he's moved there from a small town, a place where everyone knew everyone else and everyone was in everyone's business. Maybe the promises that brought him to New York, the promise of success or glamour or love or sex, have been broken. And here he is, not another soul in sight, an individual without community, a portrait of anomie. Thank you.
I was worried I was going to have a Dick Van Dyke moment coming off the stage, but I think I'm okay. And if I can figure out, I've started the clock. All right, so far things are going so well, nothing to complain about. My name's Francis Luca. I'm the chief librarian here. Normally I would do this ad lib and off the cuff, but since I was given strict instructions that I was not to go over 3 minutes or they'd get the hook out and pull me off stage, I thought I would work from a script, and so I timed it so that I should be good for 3 minutes exactly. In early April 1940, just days before the Nazis would invade and occupy Denmark, an art exhibition opened in Copenhagen Gallery on Amager Square featuring the work of Harold Rudyard Engman. Engman was not a particularly famous or celebrated artist. He neither dabbled in Danish folk tradition nor flirted with the modernist traditions of surrealism or abstraction, but he had gained some notoriety in the Danish capital. A few years earlier, Engman had begun showing his paintings in a venue below the town hall square, coining the name the Underground Painters for his band of subversive artists with a social satire bent. The paintings in the 1940 exhibition revealed the artist's obsession with dark themes, rendered in a palette perfectly suited to the dark times ahead for Denmark. At a time when the Danish government pinned its hopes on neutrality and the public dared not whisper Hitler's name aloud, Engman was unveiling paintings that unabashedly ridiculed Herr Hitler and his Nazi thugs. The public that flocked to this exhibition had little time to reflect on the anti-Nazi message of this fearless, if foolhardy, artist. Just after 4 a.m. on April 9, 1940, the German government simultaneously issued an ultimatum and sent a contingent of its huge army across the border into Denmark. In return for promises that as a Germanic brother people, the Germans would respect Danish sovereignty and territorial integrity, the king, prime minister, and cabinet recognized the de facto occupation of the country and its status as a model protectorate for the duration of the war. While the Danish government collaborated with the Nazi occupiers, Engman never reconciled himself to that expediency. Although the authorities immediately closed down Engman's exhibition, what a surprise, and the artist went into hiding, he continued to produce satirical anti-Nazi paintings in the secluded isolation of North Zealand. Ultimately, safety concerns dictated his flight to neutral Sweden, where he submitted anti-Nazi drawings to several Swedish journals and publications until the war ended and he was finally able to return to his homeland. Engman's Human Pyramid was painted in 1941 during the German occupation and the artist's internal exile. His oil-on-canvas painting portrays a history of humanity from the bottom up and reflects the artist's anti-National Socialist predilections. The bottom half or base of the pyramid lies under the dark and murky waters of the past, where prehistoric, Viking, medieval, Renaissance, and Victorian elites dominate. Turning the social pyramid on its head, the artist celebrates working class types as it progresses upward and tops it off with a boy with an angel's wings and a slingshot in hand, perhaps his nod to the dualities of human nature. The artist also uses bilateral symmetry to suggest parallels between a shark and a submarine, and between an ancient ship sunk by pirates of old and a modern wreck named Denmark sitting on the ocean floor, presumably sunk by the new pirates. The ship of state, he implies, was sunk by the fatherland, a submarine bearing the Danish flags and the slogan nationalism. Fatherland was also the title of a pro-Nazi newspaper published in Denmark, thereby suggesting subversive propaganda and the nation's complicity in her own destruction. The gloom of the past is dispelled by the inclusion of the New York skyline at daybreak. Together with the slingshot-wielding boy atop the pyramid, the sunrise suggests that with U.S. intervention and the resistance of Danes, the nation might someday, like the fearless David of biblical fame, topple the German Goliath presently occupying their nation. And I went over time, so oops.
I'm Christian Larson, curator here at the Wolfsonian. And I don't know about you, but I really hate shopping at places like Home Depot. There are few worse displays in Home Depot than the lighting section. Take a typology of design that should be light, literally, inspiring. There's almost nothing more gorgeous than a well-designed lamp. And look at what they have to offer. It's more of the same kind of industrial, watered down historic styles to the point of no style at all. IKEA, similar kind of thing. What are you choosing from? Kind of the same thing over and over and over again. It's the price, right? It's mass produced, you buy it at a good price point, and therefore you install it in your home. And a lot of people probably don't think about this twice, but seeing as I work in design, I think about this a lot, maybe too much. So, as a kind of reaction against that industrial slickness, sameness, homogeneous offerings in the big box stores, things like Etsy have popped up. People searching for something unique, something to express their individuality, customize something, even something like this that looks very industrial and made out of industrial parts is still customizable. You can make it grow organically yourself. And the price point matches. If you want something unique, you're going to pay for it. Or you could go cheap, and this is another kind of reaction on Etsy to industrial slickness. This kind of homemade Victorian throwback, let's not see anything technological, let's not see any cords, and you can have all this for the low price of $10.99. And history has a way of repeating itself. The same thing was going on in the middle of the 19th century. Industrial production was on the rise, new products were hitting the market every day, and the Brits had a really great idea. Hey, we're the industrial powerhouse of the world. Why don't we put together a big exhibition, the Great Exhibition, representing the work of industry of all nations, kind of a competitive forum to see who really designs the best stuff. And they were horrified by what they found. They thought they were going to rise to the top, and instead they found that they were producing things like this. It inspired a whole movement of design reform. which the arts and crafts movement was the main voice. The idea was that industrial production was dehumanizing people. It was taking the joy out of labor. How can we reestablish the link to the joy of making things, the direct relationship between the maker and the object? And therefore, the person who would consume it would also be a happier person and love the object more. This is a lamp by William Arthur Smith Benson. He started his own company. And he's a really interesting case example because there is maybe one complaint about the arts and crafts movement, which is that it resulted in one-off objects, very rarefied and therefore very elite and expensive. It never really truly fulfilled its promise of design for everyone. But Benson actually got a little bit closer. These were still elite objects because he sort of geared them towards his peers. He was an aristocrat. But what he managed to do was change taste. Before, plainness was associated with less prestige. The more ornamented something was, the higher the price. He elevated plainness and aesthetic simplicity to a higher level and a higher price tag. The object also displays truth to materials, one of these favorite mantras of design, probably next to form follows function, with the rigidity of brass forming the structure, supporting these very lightweight copper petals, which are used to diffuse and reflect the light. And overall, when it's lit, it offers a very pleasing, warm glow. Benson managed to produce all of this in a semi-industrial, semi-handmade state. And truth be known, there's a lot of rhetoric in the arts and crafts. They used machines. They weren't so anti-machine as they said they were. And that lamp I showed you before that was so hideous, there's a lot of hand craftsmanship in that too. So the things that were industrially produced were not necessarily completely machine, and the handmade was not completely by hand. It's a more complicated story than that. But here's Benson at his lathe. He was a master tinkerer, and I think he shares a lot in common with today's maker movement. People who are using things like rapid prototyping, 3D stereolithography to literally print objects. But once again, if you're going to play with new technologies and offer it to a kind of art design market, you're going to pay the price. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Matthew Abess, also a curator at the Wolfsonian. I have a rather indomitable cough, and I'm going to go over time, so I apologize for both. And with that, we turn from light to terrible darkness. I also have a script, because I tend to be long-winded. The years following the First World War found the beer halls of Munich resounding with complaints. Chief among these were age-old grievances concerning sovereignty, spheres of influence, and self-determination, to which were added by members of the National Socialist Party, Judaism, communism, and the diffuse, thank you for defining, John, enemy of modern life. The highly discursive prose of Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf catalogs these complaints in especially virulent terms, identifying the many pestilent forces that posed a mortal threat to the, quote, historic destiny of the nation. The text advocates aggressive territorial expansion, the annexation of Lebensraum, or living space, as a foremost solution. Its jingoistic passages presage extermination. Yet even before formalizing the final solution to the so-called Jewish question, culminating in the mass murder of European Jews, the Nazi state set about cultivating virtue by other means, and I'd initially written more benign, but as we'll see, there's in fact nothing benign about these means. Counter to complaints about the spiritually fouling effect of experimental form. By this point, modernist art was recognized as a metonym for modernity's corrupting, subjugating effect of the folkish soul. So here you see from the collection the cover to the Entartete Kunst, or degenerate art exhibition that was first held in Munich in 1937. Traveling exhibition, fantastically well attended. And then here, 2 installation views from postcards in the collection of the Entartete Kunst in 1937. So counter to all of this, the regime initiated a program showcasing art that demonstrated a, quote, return from degeneracy to the healthy path of technical skill. The Great German Art Exhibitions, or GDK, held annually at the House of German Art, seen here, in Munich from 1937 to 1944, promised to purify blood and soil through selected arrangements in oil and stone. So we're back to this. A classically inspired figurative painting by the Austrian artist Ivo Saliger, a favorite artist of the Third Reich whose work was often shown in the GDK. It's characteristic of National Socialist values as they manifested in the fine arts. While the approved paintings and sculptures presented each year at the Haus der Deutschen Kunst included few that explicitly announced their persuasive purpose, straightforward landscape and genre scenes predominated, the compositional harmony and historical precedent on view articulated clear moral messages. Saliger's image that you see here of 2 nude women is characteristic of the regime's attitude towards femininity, which privileged fit and fecund female bodies for bearing new generations of a master race. And then this is where we turn critical, because there always has to be a critic. So how does all of this bear upon the present proceedings? The following is an excerpt from the Power of Design 2014 statement. Quote, complaints can get us from here to there, dissatisfaction to action, action to innovation. Would we have advances without discontent? And I would argue that such a reductive view of progressive betterment is reckless, and in these cases, even dangerous. So as we continue our conversations, and especially those that focus on the designed environment, I would urge everyone to keep in mind Adolf Eichmann's designation as the so-called architect of the final solution, who carried the murmurings of the masses to mass annihilation. Thank you.
I'm Peter Clericuzio, and I'm the Academic Programs Manager here at the Wolfsonian. Since I suspect that many of you may be privately complaining that you've had to sit through 7 of these already, I'm going to go and cut to the chase with the section of complaints with this piece, which might show up. Okay. The creation of this chair is really what grows out of a background of complaints and a set of political disagreements, rather than pretty much almost anything else having to do with the chair. Really, in 1935, the nation of Italy under Benito Mussolini's fascist regime invaded and conquered the nation of Ethiopia, much to the chagrin of much of the members of the League of Nations. Up until that time, Ethiopia was one of the few still independent regions of Africa that had remained largely unmolested by European imperialists. And as a result of Italy's actions, the League of Nations placed sanctions on the Italians, which prevented them from importing many types of fine woods that are traditionally used in furniture manufacturing. So, given these complaints against what they were doing, the Italians looked for alternatives under a policy of what was known as autarky, or economic self-sufficiency. One of the solutions they came up with was this material called buxus. Buxus is a resin-infused paper veneer that had recently actually been developed by a paper manufacturer in Turin named Cartiere Giacomo Basso. Buxus's name actually it's actually identical to the Latin name for the shrub called boxwood, which is why I have a picture of a plant here. It is smaller than a tree, and actually ideal for small-scale manufacturing. It's often used in cabinets, musical instruments like clarinets, tool handles, marquetry, engraving, etc. And since it's a veneer, buxus only comprises the surface of the chair. Actually, the rest of this chair, which if you've been up on the 7th floor, you've probably seen it, is otherwise made out of pine lumber and plywood. So it's actually a pretty heavy piece, even though the fact that it is made out of partly paper. It is designed by the famous Italian futurist artist Fortunato Depero, who's probably more famous for designing books with bolts in them. But he was extremely enthusiastic about buxus for a few reasons, mainly because it was a modern material that could provide colorful inlay to enliven contemporary furniture. You can see the stamp of his design right here, actually here, that uses the initials IRR with the letters SANI, and it's probably at least partly upside down there. But SANI stands for Sani, the manufacturer, and you will also see the letters 3NTO for Trento, which happens to be the Italian city where it was made, and that appears on the underside of the chair here so that we can actually identify it. Deborah was also extremely interested in the preservation of Italian national and cultural heritage, and especially the culture of winter sports in northern Italy, which accounts pretty much for most of the ski motifs that you see, the actual skis and the ski poles that you see decorating the chair here. There was a time in which we thought that this was actually created for a ski lodge, but it turns out the way that this chair is dated renders that pretty much impossible. So we think this is really just created for a particular line of chairs that celebrates Italian winter sports. And that pretty much tells you all you need to know about the complaints for this chair.
We know of the existence of poetry slams and storytelling slams. I'm not sure there's ever been an art design history slam before, but this was fantastic. And also, I think without even uttering the complaint, oh no, an hour presentation. 3-minute presentations, I think we have an innovation here that could deal with all kinds of complaints about boring conferences. The most single bracing moment for me, having just said, oh, maybe complaints can lead to progress, was Matthew's suggestion that makes me some proto-Nazi. But I'm also happy that this institution can accommodate and embrace such gleeful diversity of thought. And really, what is great about this weekend, what is great about this institution, what is great about what you just saw here in the last half hour, I think, is this incredible, wide-ranging eclecticism, global eclecticism of intent and thought and form, and you know, the complaint is the shorthand that is being used to talk about what we're doing this weekend. But a provocation, I would argue, based on what we've just seen, is another. And of course, provocation can be in the form of a complaint or otherwise, but it also gets to the very heart, one of the hearts of a subject that is oft discussed and never resolved in art and design history, which is, oh, is that art or is that design? And I think we've seen here that the will to provoke and sometimes embodied thereby a complaint has standing in both places. But I feel as though I could, earn my master's degree with a week of 3-minute presentations. So tomorrow and Sunday, this is just the beginning, and I'm looking forward to every bit of it, and I hope to not disappoint you as I proceed as the sort of ringmaster, as Cathy said. Tomorrow's panels, we are looking at 3 distinct realms, each of them amazing and marvelous, and each of them deeply imperfect, which define the modern experience: cities, air travel, and the digital revolution. Fortunately, I came in on Wednesday night, so my natural hours of seething complaint about air travel has now subsided. 36, but by tomorrow I expect to have some recovered memories about that. In addition to those 3 panels, I'll be talking for an hour or so to Andy Borowitz, my friend, the great satirist. We will spend that hour figuring out everything that begins with the letters COM: complaint, comedy, communications, and I'm sure there are many more that will come up during our hour. Cathy has informed me that in my role as wingmaster, I want to tell you that if you have any questions about your dinner plans, please see Julie Chase or Fatima. Tomorrow begins, if you'd like, at 9. The formal program begins at 10, but at 9 there will be breakfast and an hour of what are described here as fun activities. You be the judge. Chair massage, fun activity. Light yoga in the 5th floor galleries. I'm sure it's fun as well. I'm a yogi myself. I practice yoga regularly. The amazing beauty confessional. And then, as I say, the sessions begin at 10 a.m. Have a great time. You're going to be seeing a lot of me and I of you, and I hope we're going to have a fun weekend. Thank you very much.